I was just 10 years old when the incident occurred. My parents were divorced, and it was one of those rare occasions when we planned to spend the holiday season together. Thanksgiving was approaching, and I was filled with excitement at the thought of seeing my dad. He used to work in Atlanta while I stayed with my mom in Austin, so these reunions were always special. But fate had something else in store for us that day. Something that would forever etch itself into my memory. Our flight was unexpectedly delayed, leaving us stranded at the airport for hours. Frustrated by the situation, my mom decided to smoke one. She took me to a bookstore and instructed me to stay within her line of sight and call her if I needed anything. I immediately ran to the thriller section, as it was my favorite genre at the time. As I looked at the titles, my eyes suddenly caught sight of a peculiar figure beside me. It was a man wearing a mask and a hat, his face completely hidden. I remember thinking that the long black coat he wore made him look like a Dementor. I felt very uncomfortable by how near he stood, but I dismissed it, assuming the man just wanted to browse the titles I was looking at. After all, the books in this section were typically meant for adults. I decided to move to the next aisle, which housed romance novels. To my astonishment, the masked man followed me, pretending to be interested in the books on the shelf opposite to mine. His behavior sent chills down my spine, and I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly amiss. Seeking confirmation, I now went into the kids section, where Dr. Seuss books awaited. To my alarm, the man followed me there as well, his presence growing more unsettling by the second. He was not even trying to hide it now. My heart pounded in my chest as I feared the worst. Desperate to escape this stranger, I quickly returned to the thriller section and grabbed a book, pretending to be interested in buying it. The man, however, continued to shadow my every move and followed me back there. I panicked and began to make my way back to where my mom was waiting. To my relief, I found my mother already halfway there. I recounted my experience, telling her about the man who had trailed me from aisle to aisle. She told me that she had seen him do that from where she stood outside the store, and that's why she came to get me. We didn't linger there any longer. My mom paid for my chosen book and we left the store together. As we walked, I couldn't resist glancing behind us, only to find that the masked man was still following, unaffected by the fact that I now had an adult with me. What did he want from us? I told my mom, and she urged me not to look, saying we were about to board the plane anyway. She was right. We lost the man when we boarded the plane. When we were ready to take off, I glanced around. My blood ran cold as I spotted the masked man seated just a few rows behind us. Did he know we would be on this flight? Was that the reason he was following us? My heart raced as I whispered to my mom, informing her of the man's presence. She urged me to remain calm, promising me we would find a way to deal with the situation. 3 agonizing hours later, we landed in Atlanta. Being in a different state didn't stop the masked man from following us. My mom took me straight to a gift shop there, and I chose a present for my dad while she kept a watchful eye. The man stayed right outside the entrance, waiting for us. It didn't look like he was about to give up. My mom decided enough was enough. As soon as we left the gift shop, she made her way toward airport security, raising her voice enough for everyone to hear. She told them how this man had been stalking us from before we even boarded the flight to Atlanta. The masked guy must have heard her, for he immediately bolted before security could make their way to him. In the end, he vanished into the crowd, leaving us shaken but grateful to have escaped any potential harm. When I recalled this incident as an adult, I realized that we could have easily become his victims had we not noticed him following us. People consider airports very safe. Me and my mom could tell you otherwise. It was finally the time when the world was going back to normal after the COVID-19 pandemic. The flight operations were gradually resuming. Due to tickets being cheap, my friends group came up with the idea of a boys' trip, for we had been cooped up in our homes for too long. We were all up for it, so it was decided. The airport, usually bustling with travelers, now appeared eerily empty, save for a handful of passengers scattered throughout the terminal. Night had fallen, and as the time zones differed vastly, our flight was scheduled for the late hours. Taking a seat in the empty waiting area, my friends and I settled in, ready for the journey ahead. There were no other passengers waiting there, aside from an elderly woman seated across from us. Her appearance was ghastly, her complexion a deathly pale, and her white hair disheveled and patchy. The first thought that came to my mind when I looked at her was that she was perfect to be casted in the role of a wicked witch. She clutched a string of beads in her weak hand, her gaze fixed upon us. More specifically, upon me. I tried to ignore her, but she continued to stare, and my eyes met hers involuntarily. Yet, she didn't look away. Her gaze unnerved me, and it didn't help that she was muttering something as she rubbed the beads. Her eyes were full of contempt, like I was the plague itself. At first, I attempted to dismiss her unsettling behavior, but as the seconds ticked by, my discomfort grew. It was almost time for us to board the plane. Sensing nature's call, I decided to make a quick trip to the restroom before we took off. My friends complained, but I said I'll make it quick. While going through a narrow corridor that led through the restrooms, I heard the sound of faint footsteps behind me. Each time I turned around to look, there was nobody in sight, leaving me to question my own sanity. I blamed it on the earlier encounter with the old woman. She had really creeped me out. I entered the men's restroom and found that it was completely empty. I didn't think much of it as there weren't many people traveling at this hour anyway. As I occupied a cubicle, the sound of a woman sobbing reached my ears. It felt like it was coming from the stall opposite to mine. I distinctly remembered that I had entered the men's toilet. Had I been mistaken? Worried and uncomfortable, I flushed the toilet, hoping to slip out now. But suddenly, there was heavy pounding on my cubicle door. A woman's anguished cries filled the air. I grasped what she was saying.
"It's all your fault!"
She screamed it over and over. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I panicked. As soon as they began, the cries stopped, drowning the restroom into an unnerving silence. I cracked open the door by just a slit, peering outside cautiously. To my relief and surprise, there was no one outside. Stepping out, I walked up to the sink to wash my hands, only to find that strands upon strands of long, tangled white hair littered the basin. The sight was repulsive, but I was just desperate to get out of there. A sob reached my ears, and I sharply turned my head to look in the direction of the sound. It was the old lady from before. She was now huddled in the corner of the bathroom, her eyes filled with madness, fixed upon me as she violently tore at her own hair. Her mouth was open, as if she were screaming, but no sound escaped her throat. Trembling, she pointed her shaky finger in my direction, unleashing a blood-curdling scream, accusing me once again that it was all my fault. I was horrified at the sight and backed off, but she lunged at me. Grabbing my collar with inhuman strength, she shook me violently, repeating the same words as before. I struggled with everything that I had, finally breaking free from her grip. I pushed her away as I rushed out of the restroom, her screams fading behind me. As I came back to the lobby, I found my friends were pretty mad at me for taking so long. But looking at my panicked expression and disheveled state, they asked what was wrong. I told them about the horrors that had transpired in the restroom. Alarmed, we found the airport security and told them about the woman. But as the boarding had begun, we couldn't stick around to witness the investigation. So we took off. Upon reaching our destination, I unpacked my suitcase. To my horror, I discovered something chilling. As I took out my clothes, I found that every single shirt had beads folded inside it. The very beads that the old woman had clutched in her hands. This meant that she had somehow gone through my things. At this point, things had turned too ominous for me to stay for the trip, and I decided to book the next flight home. I used to be a flight attendant for a private airline, but I never really spilled the beans on why I quit. Around Easter time, the airport would get super hectic with all the holiday travel. I had this friend named Stacy, and we were usually paired up on flights. She was a real cheerful girl, always bringing smiles and good vibes to everyone she met. She had a knack for bonding with everyone, whether it was with kids or old folks. But things took a weird turn when Stacy started acting all strange. She became restless and antsy, always peeking out from the crew compartments to check out who our passengers were. It was like she was afraid of being seen by someone who knew her. I tried asking her what was up, but she brushed it off, saying she was just tired and everything was cool. One day after we landed at our destination, I headed to the staff rest area at the airport. Stacy had already left the plane before me. Normally we'd walk there together, but ever since she started acting all weird, she'd leave without me, probably to dodge my constant questions. I got to the rest area and opened the door, expecting to see Stacy inside. But there was nobody there, which struck me as odd since I had literally just seen Stacy enter the room. As I took off my blazer and turned around, I froze in my tracks. Right in front of me was Stacy, lying on the ground, lifeless. Blood was all over her clothes, and there was this twisted barbed wire sticking out of her neck. It felt like my heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I clamped my hand over my mouth in shock, leaning against the wall to steady myself. Nausea washed over me, but I managed to pull myself together and ran outside, yelling for airport security. They came rushing over, saw Stacy's body, and then their eyes shifted to me. I guess they thought I had something to do with her death. The police bombarded me with questions, and they launched a full-blown investigation. They checked the CCTV footage and saw some masked guy entering the room right after Stacy and leaving a few minutes later. The thought of what could have happened if I just arrived a few minutes earlier scared the hell out of me. I probably would have ended up like Stacy, dead on the floor. They couldn't figure out who the masked man was. A lot of other staff members noticed that Stacy had been acting strange lately too. As the investigation progressed, it left everyone scratching their heads. Stacy wasn't the type to make enemies. Eventually, they had to clear out her locker for the new person taking over her job. As Stacy and I were close, they asked me to do it. So I opened up her locker and a bunch of papers fell out, scattering all over the place. I picked them up, started reading, and boy, did a chill run down my spine. They were death threats, one after another, each one more menacing than the last. I finally knew why she had been so restless. I turned them in to the investigators, thinking it might help with the case. But things were never the same at the airport after that. Late one night, after finishing my shift, I headed to the rest area to change out of my uniform before heading home. As I walked in, I couldn't help but glance over at the spot where I had found Stacy's lifeless body like I had done 100 times before. That image was burned into my brain. I opened my locker to grab my regular clothes, and a piece of paper fell out, landing on the ground. My heart was in my throat as I looked at it laying there on the floor. I mustered up all my courage and picked it up, and there it was, a note with a bone-chilling message. It said, "Give us what's ours and we'll leave you alone. But if you don't, you'll end up like your friend." My hands were shaking like crazy as I held that note. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting someone to jump out at me at any second. It hit me hard. My life was in danger, and I had no clue what these people wanted. Did Stacy owe them something? Did she have something that they were after? Maybe they thought I knew where it was, being her close friend and all. I wasted no time. I went straight to the police station and handed over the note. I demanded protection, and they assured me that they'd get to the bottom of it. But I wasn't about to mess around with my life like Stacy did. So the very next day, I quit my job. I hightailed it out of that city and went back to my hometown, a secluded place where I thought I'd be safe from whoever was after me. But let me tell you, the fear never left me. For the longest time, I was always on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder, worried that someone might show up and kill me.